Thank you to the audience. And maybe I need some help. Thank you. So the hypothesis of this capsule is the relapses do not matter in relation to long-term disability. And we all know that all approved pharmacotherapies for patients with multiple sclerosis are effective in reducing the frequency of clinical relapses. The ultimate goal is to diminish the accumulation of neurological disability over time. Do current therapies accomplish that goal? Now I want to know the opinion of the audience. May you vote, please? The question is, do current therapies accomplish the goal to diminish the accumulation of neurological disability over time? I can see, but you can wave your hand. So please, who is thinking yes? And please, who is thinking no? There are much more people thinking no. So, we can proceed. Multiple sclerosis is a chronic disease commonly causing different levels of neurological disability. There are two main phases of classical MS, relapsing remitting and secondary progressive. During the first phase, the incomplete recovery from each relapse and the following cumulative disability are the main factors influencing the long-term disability of the disease. The immunomodulatory therapy approved for treatment of multiple sclerosis intend mostly to reduce the frequency of relapses. During dozens of years, there are a lot of studies trying to confirm the influence of these therapies on relapses on one hand and indirectly on the long-term disability of the disease. And we will try to introduce the pros and cons, and my colleagues after me will explain, and we will try to conclude for the most actual agreeable opinion. This is a well-known scheme for the natural history of multiple sclerosis. For the first phase in two stages, the first phase of relapsing remitting, with firstly without any disability, any cumulative disability, and later with some disability, cumulative disability, and then the progressive phase. And we all know that during the first phase, the inflammatory lesions are more present, and we have activation of functional brain and the brain reserve with a compensation. And then later, during the disease, during the secondary progressive phase, we have the cumulative disability of relapses, even the progressive phase disability. We have less inflammatory lesions, and we have brain loss very, very imminent. And I wanted to mention some papers on the matter. The first one I want to mention is the paper from Tremblay and collaborators, The Impact of Multiple Sclerosis Relapses on Progression Diminishes with Time. The authors conducted a retrospective view on 2,477 patients with definite relapsing onset MS, followed until July 2003 in British Columbia, Canada. Time-dependent Cox proportional hazards models examined the effect of relapses at different time periods from 0 to 5 years, from 5 to 10 years, and 10 years post-onset, on time to gain, using the expanded disability status scale and the secondary progressive MS. Findings were derived from hazards ratios with 95% confidence intervals adjusted for sex, onset age, and symptoms. The results, the mean follow-up was about 21 years, and there were almost 12,000 post-onset relapses recorded. A nearly relapse within 5 years post-onset was associated with an increased hazard in disease progression over the short term, by 48% for EDSS-6 and 29% for secondary progressive MS. However, the substantially lessened to 10% for EDSS-6 and 2% for secondary progressive MS after 10 years post-onset. The impact of later relapses for the period past 5 to 10 years post-onset also lessen over time. As the conclusion of this study, relapses within the first 5 years of disease impacted on disease progression over the short term. However, the long-term impact was minimal either for early or later relapses. Long-term disease progression was least affected by relapses in patients with an extended disease duration, 10 years, or already in the secondary progressive phase. The other paper is the Natural History of Multiple Sclerosis, a geographically based study, relapses and long-term disability, from Scalper and collaborators, published in Brain in 2010. According to the authors, relapse reduction is a common therapeutic target, but clinical trials have shown dissociation between relapse suppression and disability accumulation. The authors investigated relationships between relapses and disability progression for outcomes of requiring assistance to walk, being bedridden, and dying from multiple sclerosis, according to the Disability Status Scale 6, 8, and 10. By analyzing 28,000 patients' years of evolution in 806 bout-onset patients from the London, Ontario Natural History Cohort. Survival was compared among groups stratified by, first, early relapses. Does it mean the number of attacks during the first 2 years of multiple sclerosis? Second, length of first inter-attack interval. Third, interval between onset and disability status scale 3, the moderate disability. And four, number of attacks from the third year of disease up to onset of progression and during the interrelapsing remitting phase. And the authors conclude that early clinical features can predict hard disability outcomes. Frequent relapses in the first 2 years and shorter first attack intervals predicted shorter times to reach hard disability endpoints. Attack frequencies in the first 2 years of 1 versus 3 gave differences of 7.6, 12.8, and 20.3 years in times from disease onset to disability status scale 6, 8, and 10 respectively. Time to disability status scale 3 highly independently predicted time to disability status scale 6, 8, and 10. In contrast, neither total number of relapsing remitting phase attacks nor of relapses experienced during the relapsing remitting phase after the second year up to the onset of progression showed a deleterious effect on times from disease onset, from progression onset, and from disability status scale 3 to these hard endpoints. The failure of regulatory mechanisms tied to neurodegeneration is suggested. Relapse frequency beyond year 2 does not appear to predict the key outcome of secondary progression or time to disability status scale 6, 8, and 10, highlighting two distinct disease phases related to late outcome. The other paper is the long-term evolution of multiple sclerosis disability in the treatment era, presented from MS EPIC team, and the objective of the authors of the study was to characterize the accrual of long-term disability in a cohort of actively treated multiple sclerosis MS patients, and to assess whether clinical and magnetic resonance imaging data used in clinical trials have long-term prognostic value. So this paper is published in 2016 in Annals of Neurology, so it's something newer than the other studies, and you can see that even the data from MRI are included in it. This is a prospective study of 517 actively managed MS patients enrolled at a single center. More than 91% of patients were retained with data ascertained up to 10 years after the baseline visit. At this last assessment, neurological disability, as measured by the expanded disability status scale, was stable or improved compared to baseline in 41% of patients. Subjects with no evidence of disease activity, NIDA, this is the new concept of NIDA, by clinical and MRI criteria, during the first 2 years had long-term outcomes that were no different from those of the cohort as a whole. And the interpretation of the data was rates of worsening and evolution to secondary progressive multiple sclerosis were substantially lower when compared to earlier natural history studies. Notably, the NIDA two-year endpoint was not a predictor of long-term stability. The data call into question the utility of annual MRI assessment as a treat-to-target approach for MS care. So I think to conclude here, I had some more slides, but I think that my colleagues after me will be more able to explain and to convince us for going on.